They are the fabulous learning nerds. Cause if you're tired of the old ways of getting it done, you've got the fabulous learning nerds. Scott, Dan, and Abby are making it fun. The best ideas that you've ever heard. So everybody spread the word. They're gonna keep your wheels turning. The fabulous learning nerds. Fabulous learning nerds. Oh yeah!
Hey everybody, welcome back to another amazing episode of your Fabulous Learning Nerds. I'm Scott Judy, your host, and with me, my partner in crime, Dan Coonrod.
Dan the man.
Dan.
What's up, Scott? How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing fantastic. How have you? It's been a minute.
It has been a minute.
It has been a minute. We were all set to record last Sunday, and then I woke up and went, oh, it's Mother's Day. And so I kind of reminded everybody that it was Mother's Day, and Abby kindly suggested that we not record on a Mother's Day. And that was a good suggestion that we don't record on Mother's Day.
Good call. Good call.
It was a great call. Did you spoil your wife on Mother's Day or your mother?
I did. I live pretty close to my folks. Drove over to go see my folks. I actually saw my folks on Saturday, the day before Mother's Day, and we hung out. That was nice. Nice.
And how was everybody on Mother's Day?
I mean,
Fair
I hope
to Midland.
I should have seen that coming.
I know you should have.
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah,
You did. I opened the door. You didn't walk in. I don't understand.
I didn't.
What's up with that? No.
I know.
Hey, we should really get
the.
You should. Absolutely. We should get the opinion of a real mom who understands the importance of Mother's Day. You love her. Abby, Dawson, everybody. Hey, Abby.
Hey, Scott.
How was your Mother's Day, Abby?
Was great.
Okay.
Lots of food.
Okay. Food is good. It was good. Okay. All right. You had that look on your face like it really wasn't great, but you're going to say it's great. So was it really great?
It was great in parts. I mean, Mother's Day is like, there's a lot, right? Like, there's a lot of ways for it to
go sideways.
Not
Did it
be
go
what you hoped. Yeah.
Oh, I'm
a little
sorry.
sideways.
Well, we love
okay.
you. Folks, if
Thank
you would
you.
like to share your love with Abby on Mother's Day, you can email us at learningnerdscast@gmail.com. Oh, by the way, we did get an email, and it basically said, I would like to join in the conversation, which is fantastic. So if somebody's listening, please contribute, person who sent that email, with what you feel about the conversation that you listened to, which is fantastic. But so you had an overall great Mother's Day, and we're back, and everybody's happy, and that's a good thing, right?
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we missed you a few weeks ago with Lisa. Right.
We're missing a little bit of enthusiasm this morning.
Hey, let's go ahead and
about?
fix that. I know. Let's go ahead and fix the enthusiasm because we have a very special guest with us today. I've known this individual for a few years. He's an incredible inspiration to me. We are accountability partners, and he's got amazing stories about learning. He's doing some fantastic things in his life. So without further ado, let's invite our special guest, Mr. Joe Matz, everyone, with a segment that we like to call What's Your Deal?
Hey, man, what's your deal?
Joe.
Hey, Scott.
Hey, my friend. What's your deal?
Yeah, that's quite a question. And I've been thinking about that. My deal is I'm a lifelong learner. I'm also a lifelong teacher. And in thinking about learning and teaching, I realized I started teaching when I was like 7 years old in judo class. And as I moved up the ranks in judo class, I taught the children and adults coming up behind me. So I was a yellow belt. I was teaching white belts. Then I was a green belt, and I was teaching yellow belts. And then moving up, always teaching behind, and enforcing what I had learned at those levels. So that was a great experience. But
I was going to ask if you were teaching your instructor, because you seem that good enough to do that.
No. That would have been interesting. But I have lived around the world And I spent 9 years in Italy. I spent 9 years in Brazil. I've now been in the US in my adult life almost 9 years, or almost 18 years. Sorry. Yeah. Almost half my adult life I've lived in the US. I was born in the US and traveled overseas, not knowing exactly what I was doing, not speaking the language, and not knowing anyone. And figured out how to own, operate, start, run over 10 businesses
Wow.
in these different countries.
I wanna like not give away everything in your background because I know you want to share your lifelong journey experiences in the lessons that we learned that we can go ahead apply here as as learning professionals. And so with that, folks, let's go ahead and we'll dive into the topic of the week. All right, lifelong learning and lessons from that, Joe. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start? Let's talk about Italy. Joe, why don't you tell us a little bit about what made you go to Italy and some of the things that you learned by doing what you were doing in Italy, in the boot, so to speak.
Right. So I graduated college doing exactly what I wanted to do, where I wanted to do it. And about 5 months into that, I got an offer to go to Italy. A fellow had lost his eyes on the ground and needed eyes on the ground to look over his interest, his business interest in Italy. So I kind of thought, if not now, when? I had nothing tying me to the US. So I went to Italy and kind of fumbled around a little while, just, keeping an eye on things, trying to figure out what I needed to do. And one thing I wanted to do was to integrate into the society as much as possible as an American foreigner on Italy soil. And I avoided Americans. And the reason I did that was because I met Americans who had lived in Italy for 3, 4, 5 years, and they barely spoke Italian. They went to the American church. They went to the American bar. They ate hamburgers. And I decided I wanted to eat pasta. I wanted linguine, I wanted saltimbocca. I wanted the Italian experience. So I avoided Americans, and it was very lonely in the beginning. But little by little, I made some friends. I made lots of friends eventually. But I started to speak with a dictionary, and I started to learn what I needed to do in my job, being eyes on the ground. And eventually, I became the sales lead in Italy, and I did that because the company introduced vitamins, and I knew vitamins, and I could talk about vitamins, and I could help the sales folks talk about vitamins, and that's what I did. I went around the country, teaching salespeople how to speak about and sell vitamins in a culture where vitamins were not the norm, and that was just a lot of fun, and I enjoyed it a whole lot, and eventually became the sales lead there.
What's your thoughts on that learning process, learning a second language? You said you used a dictionary for that. And then how powerful, important was it for you to just kind of like immerse yourself and try to just kind of figure it out? Like today with technology, and I've seen people do it, I can go to my phone and I can translate anything you're saying. It'll listen to what you have to say, and then it'll go ahead and translate that. Or you can go ahead and buy one of these little pocket translators, right? And it'll pick up the language, it'll speak it back and all that good stuff. But what was your experience in, learning that? Because I might imagine that you didn't know any Italian.
I didn't know any Italian. No.
Okay.
My first experience was a bad experience. I joined a course, and this was a course of foreigners in Italy who wanted to learn Italian. I had just finished 16 years of school. And now I was working, and I got into this course, and I lost motivation within 5 minutes. I stuck with it for a month, and then I quit. I did nothing. I didn't want to be in school again. And so what I did is I did two things. I bought a magazine, comes out weekly in Italy, or used to anyway, called Topolino. And Topolino is the Italian word for Mickey Mouse. And they're animated stories written in Italian, Donald Duck, Mickey Mouse, and all the other characters. And so I figured that'd be easy to learn. And then I started speaking Italian like Mickey Mouse, and thought maybe I need to cut back on this. So I bought some bicycle magazines because that's something I'm interested in. And when you're reading with a dictionary on your left and what your reading material is in front of you, you've got to have something interesting. Otherwise, it's too difficult, it's too hard, it's not interesting. So I got bicycle magazines and I started learning to speak about bicycles in Italian. And then I made some friends that were also cyclists, and they helped me to speak in full sentences. And eventually that translated into business talk, and I moved on with learning the language. But I found the lesson there was make it interesting. Make it interesting so that you will be motivated to learn. Because learning a foreign language, even on foreign soil, is not easy. I remember my first sentence. So I'm in my hotel. I've been there a day or two, and I'm studying and I'm studying. I'm looking at this, this one phrase, and because I need to go out and find this out, right? I needed to buy, what was it? Holy smokes. Oh, I needed the train. I needed to get on train number 95. So I studied this phrase, how to get on train or autobus, or bus 95. So I had it down, right? And now I'm ready to go on the street. I'm ready to speak Italian. And I said, Como si trova autobus numero 95? And I should have said 95, which would have been 95 in Italian, but I said 95 in English. And the problem was when I got directions on how to find that bus, I didn't understand a word he said.
So you got the first part. You can ask a question. Yeah.
Did you nod your head and just kind of go, okay? Seemed like a good idea at the time.
Italians speak with their hands, so I was able to follow the way he pointed, and then I asked someone again.
Yeah.
Kind of narrowing down on it.
So, Joe, that brings me to a question I kind of have. So there's learning the words of a language, and then there's learning to have conversations. And the conversations are more than the words, right? How did you bridge that? It sounds like that was your first introduction to realizing that the words weren't going to be enough, that you had to learn how to actually converse. How'd you bridge that piece?
Very slowly. And it just took time. The first thing was talking with one person. So when you're one-on-one and someone is flexible enough to understand, you don't understand the language very well. They'll slow down. They'll use simple language. They'll use more hand gestures. And that conversation can go on. That probably took 6 months, 8 months. In a conversation, the Italians and anyone, I guess, in any language will speed up and they'll talk faster. And I was always 2 sentences behind. So they're like, yeah, Joe, seems like a nice guy, but he's really quiet. Well, that's because I was 2 sentences behind and I'm translating in my head. That probably took a good 18 months before I could keep up with it. And then there's the phase where you understand the jokes and the cultural references. And that gets rough. If you go to Italy and you say, no soup for you, they're not going to, even if you say that in Italian, they're not going to understand what you're saying. Because Seinfeld at that time wasn't even around, right? But it did take a while to get there. So there's cultural references also. When you understand that, then you've really got the language down.
And when you started incorporating and actually teaching folks how to sell in that language, sales is in itself a whole different language, even in the US. How in the world did you start to piece together what a sales process would be in Italian?
Well, I really educated the salespeople on vitamins and on the benefits of integrating vitamins to your regular diet and the health benefits of that. So what they did was more consultative or informative type sales conversation with folks they were talking to. And they would just talk about vitamins. Now, one advantage is they could say, everyone in America is taking vitamins. That would pique the interest at that time. That there was a good relationship, and there still is, with Italians in America. And they would just talk about the benefits and then their personal benefits from taking those vitamins. Because I had all the salespeople take the vitamins. Right? You've got to experience your benefits so that you can talk about them with more influence and more confidence.
from a sales perspective, I'm sure, Abby, who loves sales, might jump in a little bit here, but that's really, really true for those folks that are designing for sales. And we talk about that a lot. Like, we got to have some personal connection, either understanding what those benefits are without your personal experience, either through testimonials or, being around the product from a relevancy standpoint. But nothing speaks louder than I understand this and I understand the benefit of it because I went through it. So I think that's one thing from a sales perspective. We can go ahead and translate that. I think that's cool. The other thing that you brought up, which I think is really, really important, is this idea of relevancy. And I think it's awesome that you learned by reading a magazine on Mickey Mouse. I would probably pick up comic books, right? And then try to figure it out that way. So there's some personal connection or personal relevancy. And I think that's really important from a learning perspective. And your experience in, learning a different language via a course, I've experienced that. I don't know if Abby and Daniel have that, when they made me take a second language in college. So I went to this course that I didn't want to go to. And I think I remember 3 or 4 things, Je parle en français un peu. That's about it. I mean, that's all I really remember. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Où est le WC apparently is where's the bathroom, which is probably a good thing. And again, your answer would be, I wouldn't be able to translate that. So, I mean, relevancy is super important. Go ahead, Dan.
I was going to say, funny story, because I also took 3 years of French 1, French 2, and French 2. Oh. And I don't remember any of it because none of it got used. And, yeah. And so, Joe, to hear you come at this from the other side where you're like, well, I'm in Italy now, so better learn Italian. And just the process of like the sense of like just immersing yourself and like jumping in with both feet is awesome. And then to Abby's point, having to not just learn Italian, but then learn enough to teach other people how to sell. That's nuts. That's crazy. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's very important, the motivation to learn and the utility of learning. And definitely my motivation was very high because I wanted to eat. I wanted to talk. I didn't want to be isolated for the rest of my life. So I had to learn Italian. I had made a commitment to stay in Italy for 2 years. That was the initial commitment. And so I was going to learn the language. No doubt.
Yeah. My husband lived in Europe for a year. And I remember one of the first motivations he had to get much better at speaking, he was living in Germany, was speak German. He wanted to order food that he actually wanted. He said, I kept randomly ordering things because I didn't know what I was looking at, and I'd get something and I didn't like it. And he was like, I wanted to start eating food that I actually wanted to eat.
Right. Right. Yeah. One of the things I learned in adult learning theory is it's got to be relevant. It's got to be something you can use right away and something you almost need to use right away. Otherwise, we have so much going on. We just put it off.
You did some work in Italy and then you went and did it again in Brazil.
Right. So after 5 years in Italy, I got an offer to go to Brazil and start the company in Brazil, do what I had done and seen in Italy. Yeah. And the interesting thing, I asked, so what do you want me to do in Italy? What do you want me to do in Brazil? And I was told this: what you saw in Italy, we want you to duplicate in Brazil. That was my job description.
So I'm fascinated by that, Joe, because I've been in those positions before and it's never actually been the same thing. So I've gone in with confidence, like, oh, I've done this before. I'm going to knock it out of the park. I know exactly what to do. I get into the new role and I'm like, it's not the same. So was that your experience, or what was that process like?
It was kind of scary. Yeah. And it was not the same. Brazil is different from Italy. So it was a lot more challenging than I would have imagined, because I did think, oh yeah, I've seen this. I've done some of this. Haven't done it all. I've done some, maybe, but I've seen it and I can duplicate it. Yeah, it took a little bit more than that. Right. Because it's a different culture and a different language. I had to learn how to operate on Brazilian soil. And that was exciting, scary, frustrating, and exhilarating all at the same time.
What are some of the differences that you found there? I'm super interested in this. Like, you say it, and I would agree with you. It would be super exciting. I'd be super terrified as well. Like, what do I need to do? Like, what are some of the, you have an American culture, which is its own thing. And now I've learned Italian culture, and then we go to Brazil. So what are some of the key differences that you found there?
Yeah. So the Brazilians are very laid back. They're very laid back. They're very creative, and they're super nice, and they're wonderful, wonderful people there. And I just found great folks. But laid back, and they get things done, not always in a straight line. In fact, I might say usually in a curvy line. And there's a word in Brazil that you need to know. It's called jeito. And jeito is used in the sense, it's hard to translate. If you say, hey, I need this document in 1 hour. And the guy says, no, there's no way. I can't do it in an hour. I can maybe tomorrow, maybe after tomorrow. And you say, but I need it in an hour. He says, but there's no time. I can't do it today. And you say, isn't there a way you could give it un jeito? Right? In Portuguese, it might be, não dá para dar um jeitinho. And what that means, and the response from the guy. So you say, isn't there a way you could give some jeito? And the guy says, maybe. Yeah, I think I can do it in 1 hour. It is a magical word.
Okay, so I'll bite. What like best guess? What is the translation of jeito?
Oh gosh, Dan, I was afraid you would ask me that.
I'm so sorry.
How much money does jeito mean in Brazil? Because that's what I would assume it would mean. Like it.
Oh no, Scott, you want to talk about the despachante? Okay. Yes, we can talk about that. But
sure.
The jeito, how do you translate jeito? You translate jeito into a way. Isn't there a way? Isn't there a roundabout way? Isn't there some trick or some magical thing you can do to get it done? It kind of invokes that type of spirit.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you found that would work.
You try it. Try it in America. See if it works.
Well, I would have to explain what jeito means first, right? My experience with that, hey, isn't there a way that you can figure this out? That's a 50-50 crapshoot for me. That's my experience. Depending upon engagement.
I've definitely had leaders who, when I've been like, oh man, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get that done in the time frame you're asking, and they're like, find a way. So I guess that's kind of the same thing. So if like a leader looks at me and like, find a way, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll find a way.
Okay.
I think Joe's approach is a little more human versus you may have to find another job, Dan. That's what I hear when you say that. You find a way, like you better find a way or you're out of here, right?
Yep. So Scott, a despachante is someone who has connections and can get things done for a fee. For example, if you need a passport, it might take 2 months, but you go to a despachante and pay him a little bit of money and give him the forms, and he gets it done in 3 days.
So I'm gonna say this. Isn't that a bribe?
No.
Okay.
No, it's a service, Dan. There's a difference between a bribe and a service.
A service fee. It's a service fee. My bad. Okay.
The expectation with the service fee is that you'll actually get the work done, correct, Joe?
I like that. Yes, Scott.
Yes.
A bribe there is no guarantee with a bribe. That's my experience.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
That's your experience?
Yeah. Thank you. I was like, do I derail us right now and ask Scott what his experience with bribes is, or is that a off podcast thing? Because there's a podcast
we were going to talk about that offline. We're going to give Joe the mic back.
All right, Scott, get us back on track.
So, all right. Now, you and I talked about part of your opportunity within Brazil is you had the opportunity to speak in front of large crowds. You want to talk a little bit about that and some learnings you got from that? Because that was pretty impactful for me when we had that conversation.
Right. So I started doing talks and sales conversations in small groups, and then those groups became larger. And I was always translated in the beginning. I had consecutive, it's called consecutive translator. So I would speak a sentence, they would speak a sentence. I would speak a sentence, they would speak that sentence. And that went on for longer than I wanted it to, because I was not given the okay by my host to speak in Portuguese. But then the crowds grew. So I got on the speaking circuit, and I was still speaking in English for a while. But I got to travel all over Brazil, and it was absolutely amazing. The topics I spoke on were priorities management. You might think of that as time management, and personal productivity and sales. And these weren't new concepts, but I was able to speak from the American-Italian perspective. And it was desired. So I got to travel all over and visit a whole lot of Brazil. It was exciting. And then I finally was good enough in Portuguese that I was allowed to speak on stage in Portuguese. And that just made it totally, totally fun. I remember speaking in Bahia. Now, Bahia is basically on the equator. It's very hot. And after probably 300 people in an outdoor setting, the fellow came to me and he said, "Joe, that was such a great speech." And I said, "Oh, I'm glad you liked it." He said, it was great. Nobody fell asleep. So this was the big compliment. Nobody fell asleep during my talk. And I often said they let me speak and they let me go around and speak to folks because my accent was such and my Portuguese was at such a level, people had to pay attention. They couldn't relax because they wouldn't understand because my Portuguese was not that good.
And you were talking to me about that you had, I hate to say it, shills in your audience. Well, you had people who were there and paid to be there to create a buzz.
So there were folks in the audience who were, I guess they were collaborators in a way. So when I was introduced to on stage, they would stand up and give a standing ovation and clap, clap, clap and hoot and holler. And so everyone else followed suit, and it got the crowd excited. Before I got to town, they actually ran some contests every once in a while. Not every place I went, but they would talk about certain goals to reach. And if you met that goal, you got to go to dinner with Joe after the talk. And oftentimes we'd have 20 to 30 people out for pizza after my talk, and we would just gather around and chat. That was a lot of fun and a chance for me to get to know the people there. One time we were talking and everyone's gathered around because I'm talking. There's a lot of people in the restaurant, and somebody on another table called one of the participants over and says, "Hey, who is that? What church is that?" And they said, "No, that's not a church. That's Joe. He's a businessman." And the guy says, No. He must be a preacher because everybody's huddled around listening to him. I thought that was really funny.
So having people who are there to help you create excitement, not a bad idea, especially for in today's environment, like web calls. That's a strategy that I know that my team has done many, many times. Like, okay, I know what questions to ask. So if we put it out there, what questions people have, and we get crickets, which can happen. You got somebody in the room that can actually provide or help give you a push. And if you don't have that person, you can certainly do that as a facilitator too, like toss out a question to get people to think. So I thought that was really interesting that they provided that for you, so you didn't have to think about that. That's great. And I love, even if it's not completely genuine, I love the idea that I'm going to get a standing ovation. I think that's a really great thing. So
yeah, that's that does feel good getting on stage, and speaking on stage is absolutely amazing.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Me, I know some people are very scared of that, but I would suggest you do it. Just try it. Start small. The energy and the exchange of energy is absolutely amazing when you're on stage.
So, Joe, I've got a question. You've been in a lot of uncomfortable situations. You've grown from a lot of those. I'm curious, when you started out in Italy, when you started out in Belize, if you were in a position where you didn't know what was going on, or you felt like you didn't have what you needed to get through a situation, like you didn't have the language skills, or you didn't have the understanding of the culture, are you someone who has always kind of leaned in to say, well, what do I need to do better? Or did you become that person? Were you at some point in your life someone who was like, oh, this is uncomfortable, maybe I need to back out or go find myself somewhere that is more comfortable? I'm guessing that you were the first kind of person, the lean towards it.
Yeah, Abby, I think you're right. I've always done that with sports in the beginning. Before I got into business, I would do that with sports, and I did that with college courses, and I leaned in. Yeah, uncomfortable situations they're not really so enjoyable, but it gets better. As you lean in and you learn what you need to learn, and you apply that, and then you adjust along the way. One of the examples I like is when they first shot a rocket to the moon. They kind of aimed at the moon and shot the rocket, and they adjusted along the way because they knew they would be hundreds of miles off with just a small degree of difference on Earth. You'd be hundreds of miles off by the time you got to the moon. So you make adjustments along the way. And I think if you take a lot of the life activities and experiences that you're able to start and then adjust along the way, we all understand beginners. And we're all beginners when we start something new. Do what you can, learn what you need to do, and adjust along the way.
Love that. Love that.
I love that too. You then move on from Brazil, and you went and I believe you opened up an English language school. You want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I went to Italy, and I first started in Milan. My first 5 years was in Milano, Italy, and then I went to Abruzzo, and Abruzzo is on the Adriatic. It's just a beautiful area. And I thought I would try something new. I'd get a job in a physical location with a boss close by. And I tried that, and it didn't work. The boss ended up saying, "No, Joe, we're not going to do that." I said, "But what about what we talked about?" "No, we're not going to do that." I'm like, "Okay, then I'm out of here." And I decided, I don't need that at this stage in my life. I don't need that. So I started hanging up 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper around the town that said, "If you want to learn English, call Joe." That was my advertising, right? And I started getting calls, and I started teaching English. Now, what I did before I started teaching was to find a system that would work for me for teaching English. So I went to the largest bookstore. It was about 50 minutes away by train. And I spent the afternoon in the bookstore looking at their various English courses and books that they had. Chose one that made sense to me, and I started using that to teach English. I started getting clients. I started getting more clients. I started raising my fees. I started teaching on Saturday. I raised my fees again, and then I started hiring teachers. And I hired mother tongue English speakers. And eventually we started teaching Spanish and German in public schools, private schools, companies, community associations, and private lessons. It was amazing because I loved teaching English. It was great. And then I only worked 8.5 months a year because Italy is a beautiful country with thousands and thousands of miles on the water. And nobody likes to work or do extra things during the summer because there's so much other things. And so during the summer, I had off and I started a mountain bike tourism school with some friends. We would take tourists up to the mountains and go cycling. Um, but teaching English, I taught children and I taught adults. And the I had to learn how to make it relevant and how to give them practice in the language immediately. Because like Dan spoke about, and Scott, when you take a course in school and you're not going to use the language, the motivation is very low. The retention is very low. So I started the students out the first day having conversations. And they weren't long conversations. They were like, hello, what's your name? Conversations. And that's about as far as we got the first day. But then we built upon that. When I was able to get into the middle school in town, it was a small town, right? I met every student in that school once a week for a half hour in small groups. And I taught them how to introduce me to their parents if they happened to see me walking around town. And it was the most fun. These 12-year-olds say, Professor Matz, Professor Matz. And they would introduce me to their parents in English. And their parents would be like, oh, wow, my son, he's speaking English. It was, that was a lot of fun. But
that's awesome.
You make it relevant. And you make it fun, and you get the folks practicing and using what they're learning. And I found that the retention is so much higher at that point.
I think I love that. And that's like the rule for learning everywhere, like not just for language, but like if you make it fun and engaging and you make sure that they're going to use it, like people are going to remember stuff. I feel like too often we decide I'm going to teach people some facts just in case. And then we spend a lot of time to teach them some facts. And then they don't use them until 6 or 7 months later when they do need them. And then when they don't remember them, we're upset at them. Like, why didn't you remember this obscure arcane fact I taught you half a year ago? And it's like, because they never used it. Like, why would you remember that? We're all busy people. There's way more important things. And here you are talking exactly about like best learning practices in your English speaking school in Italy, which is I'm so jealous. So jealous. It's so amazing.
And I love that example. I love that not only did you find a way for them to use it, but in a meaningful way that would add to their experience of learning the language. Because I know not only would I be excited to see my son speaking another language, he would be excited that I was excited for him. So it just reaffirms and validates for him that he's done a good thing and that it was worthwhile to do. And I think I love that you didn't over-engineer it. Like it was a simple introduction. So you don't have to find this incredibly elaborate plan to make something sticky and effective. I think it's a great example of good execution, Joe.
Thank you. Yeah, I was looking for the immediate win. I mean, we've all been 12 years old before, right? You want an immediate win. You want something that's gonna happen right now, especially in today's world with everything going on and the retention rate and the attention rate going down. You want that immediate win. And that's true for adults too.
Awesome. So you transition into doing all this stuff from a learning perspective, learning all these things and all the experiences that you had. I know you talked about climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. Actually, I'll pause there for a minute. Talk a little bit about that, because that's something that I would love to do, but probably wouldn't. But I would love to know your experience, and I would love to know what you learned from that. And then we can go ahead and transition into, what you're doing today, how all this kind of applies, right? So the things we've learned and how we apply it.
Yeah, great. So I'm not a mountain climber. And the 8 folks that made up the mountain climbing team are not mountain climbers. And here's how it happened. I'm sitting at an inspirational spot. We call it a bar, and I'm drinking beer. And my dad says to me, "Hey, Joe, if I climb Mount Kilimanjaro, will you come with me?" And I was a few beers in, and I'm like, "Sure, why not?" And I didn't know he was serious. But we started looking and researching with the question, could this be done? And could this be done by us? And we found out Mount Kilimanjaro is a difficult hike of 7 days uphill. You don't need mountain climbing equipment. You do need some cold weather sleeping equipment and hiking equipment. You need the right boots, but you could do it. It's possible. And we got other family members involved, and we would be accountable on Sunday to post pictures of where we had hiked during the weekend as part of our training regimen. I learned that accountability was very important because you didn't want to arrive Sunday and not have a picture to post in our private social media group. So then we started learning about the equipment we needed. One thing that people have found very interesting, my dad wanted a trainer. He wanted a private trainer to help him get in shape to climb a mountain. So he goes online and looks for trainers, right? And a lot of people are saying, get rid of your dad bod, right? Lose 3 inches, get rid of those love handles, all things like that, right? Get your pre-baby body back, kind of thing. And there was one guy who said, I help middle-aged men climb mountains. That was his tagline. And that's the guy my dad hired for obvious reasons. And he learned what he needed to do to get in shape so that he could climb the mountain. And, one of the learning things of climbing the mountain is that we were able to do it because we had expert guides. Our main man was called MC, right? We used to call him MC Hammer. And he helped us get up the mountain. And one of the words I remember is pole pole, which means slow, slow. It's not a race. It's a marathon. And you take slow steps because you're going up into altitudes where oxygen is less prevalent than sea level. Kilimanjaro is 19,341 feet high. And breathing is not so easy up there, so you go slow. You take a step, you take 2 steps, maybe to go as far as you might go with 1 step when we're walking normally. We had awesome people helping us out to get up that mountain. We had the guide. So there were 8 climbers, and there was 48 people helping us get up the mountain. The Sherpas, if you will. They carried tents. They carried some of our equipment. They carried food. We had fresh eggs every morning that someone had to carry up the mountain so that we could have those fresh eggs. Yeah, there was a lot of help. And without them, we never would have made it up the mountain. The main guide, he had his assistant guides, and he would train them. So part of his job was training his assistants so that one day they could be guides. And it was great watching him do this because sometimes MC would be in the back of the group and he would have one of his assistants leading us so they could learn how to lead. And then some days he would be in the front with the assistant, or the assistant would be in the back. But they were switching roles as MC gave more and more responsibility to his assistants so that one day the assistant will become a lead guide. And that on-the-job training and putting the assistant in the position of being the leader, I found very inspirational.
Joe, it sounds like you've had a lot of roles where you didn't even know what you didn't know when you started. Putting training together, I've been in that position many times where people have asked me to design a training where I have no knowledge of the content at all. And I've had to create training anyway, which is fine. As a trainer, that's a lot of our role. What advice would you give somebody who's in that position? You've got a task and you literally don't even know what you don't know. What would you do?
Start with the very basics. And then compose a list of things you need to know, of what you think you need to know. And as you go through that list, you'll be adding things to that list. give you an example. When I went to Brazil and I had to set up a business in Brazil, and I know nothing about setting up a business in Brazil. I didn't know what I didn't know, but I knew and I recognized that I didn't know. I asked the American consulate for a recommendation for a lawyer who spoke English, and I took that lawyer to lunch. First guy said, "No, I'm not doing that." No, well, the second guy said, "Sure, I'll go to lunch with you." We had antipasta, we had pasta, we had a bottle of wine on the table. We had steak. Oh my gosh, the steak in Brazil, and then we had dessert. And all the time, I was drilling him with questions about setting up a business in Brazil, so that when I spoke with a Brazilian lawyer who became my lawyer, I knew the right questions to ask. I wasn't going to get finagled, right? It's like getting into a taxi cab in a city you don't know, and he takes the scenic route. I didn't feel like I was in that position because I spent $230 on lunch with this lawyer. And that helped me to learn a little bit more, Abby, of what I needed to know. I was still green, but at least I knew the direction and I knew some intelligent questions to ask.
I think that's great advice, to invest in yourself and in the project early on.
So, as we start to wind some things down, love the stories, love the lessons. They're absolutely fantastic. Talk a little bit about Apexable today and what you're doing, and then how all these experiences have helped you, as from a learning perspective, the modalities from a learning perspective, be successful at what you're doing here in the States with Apexable.
So I help business owners and solopreneurs and executives who want to get out of the corporate world. I help them stand out from the crowd and create a unique signature program that they can bring their clients through. So they have knowledge, experience, and expertise, but they don't know how to market that because they've never been in a situation where they had to market that, or they've been doing it and it hasn't been working. So we take the knowledge, experience, and expertise and find out what problems they're uniquely suited to solve. And, that takes some learning about yourself. It takes really digging down into what have you done, where have you had success, where have you had failure, where have you felt most comfortable, where have you felt most excited and energized in doing what, and what makes you unique. And it sometimes takes someone from outside. And I know for me it did. I didn't realize my superpower was starting over. That's kind of I was kind of depressed when I realized that. But that's what I've done. I've started over, different languages, different businesses all through my life. So what I do now is I help people redesign their business, transform their business to make it more personal and more unique. And the learning process that goes through that, it's like it's like an extended aha moment where people learn, wow, yeah, that does have value. People, we all have experience. We all are unique in certain ways. And that uniqueness has value in the marketplace. Let's find where it has value. Let's find your uniqueness, your superpower, and find where that has value. That's different from starting with the problem. That's different than starting with a niche market, right? We start with the individual. And I think that's where the learning is. I think that's where the aha moments are.
Sounds like the guy who taught middle-aged men to hike Kilimanjaro had that.
I think you're right.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. So I do that with one-on-one and group coaching, but I also have a program online now. It's free if you have the code. So the online program, it's the first one that I've done, and I call it Attract, Don't Chase. It's about attracting more clients, standing out from the crowd, creating an extraordinary value, and composing your compelling message. There's tremendous value in it, more value than I thought I was going to put in because I kept expanding it and expanding it. And I was very generous with information and sharing. that course. So I think it's a great course to do. I'm coming up with something much better, but this one is free right now, or close to free, depending on when you're listening to this. I think it's a great place to start. And, it's, if you like what you see and you like what you hear and you like the style, then maybe we should work together. Maybe there's more value to come. If you don't, I'm not offended. It's not a problem. Find someone who you relate to.
Awesome. Well, hey, as we begin to put things together, is there any one thing that you'd want to share with our audience that you didn't have an opportunity to talk about? You shared a lot of great stuff. Is there any key leave behinds or key aha moments or best practices you want to share with our audience?
Yeah, I would just say very simple. Don't do what I did in waiting so long to really find out what your superpower is. And that your uniqueness, it doesn't make you weird. It just makes you unique and different. And that is awesome. And explore that, because there's value in the marketplace, because there's other people who are, if I could say this, that are different in the way that you're different, that are strange in the way that you're strange, and they will identify with you. You don't need 1 billion people. You don't need 1 million people in most businesses. You need to find the few that become your tribe.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Joe. Appreciate it. Appreciate your time here this morning. Yes. Okay. Calm down, everybody. Calm down. All right. That's enough. Hey, could you do us a favor? Could you let our audience know how they could connect more with you?
Yeah, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm sure that'll be in the show notes, or directly on my website, which is apexable.com. Don't forget the dash. It's apex-able.com.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate all your stories. Appreciate the knowledge and the wisdom. Don't stop learning, everybody. Learning is a lifelong journey. It's a great, cool thing. Daniel-san.
Yes, Scott.
Could you do me a solid and let everybody know how they could connect with us?
Absolutely. All right, party people. If you haven't already, hit us up at learningnerdscast@gmail.com. Email us any questions you may have. Finish up on maybe an email you sent earlier last week where you said, would love to talk more. That would be cool. Email us any questions you may have for Joe. If you're on Facebook, you can find us at Learning Nerds. And finally, for our Instagram peeps, Fab Learning Nerds. Scott?
Hey, everybody, do me a favor. Could you go ahead and hit that subscribe button, share this episode out with your friends? If you're getting us on a podcatcher like Stitcher or iTunes, leave us a review. We got a whole bunch of really good reviews. Let us know how we're doing. It helps us improve the show that we deliver to you and get our word out to more folks. With that, I'm Scott.
I'm Dan.
I'm Abby.
I'm Joe.
And we're your fabulous learning nerds, and we are out.